Hello everybody, it's Louise here, and welcome to my third episode of the A-TREE-ciation podcast, where we'll be talking about trees, and, you guessed it, trees. If you want to listen to this podcast series from the start, go back to my channel and click on the playlist. In this episode, the main focus of our attention will be on sycamore trees, because I feel that sycamores, being relatively mundane as trees go, are underappreciated. And since this podcast is all about the appreciation of trees, I think that the sycamores of the world deserve a shout-out. Hello, sycamores. We love you. I hope they heard. And I hope they didn't mind how many times I repeated the word sycamore in these past few seconds. Whilst these trees are common, we all know about their little helicopter seeds. As a child, you probably tried to catch them when they fell, or you'd pick them up and toss them in the air to see them spin. I still do. Anyway, these are actually tiny winged fruits called samaras, or keys. They are formed from dangling clusters of yellow-green flowers that bloom in May, and stay in pairs for the most part. Occasionally, the fruits will split off from each other prematurely, but they will still fly in a strange twizzling pattern, if twizzling is even a word. I think it is. Yeah. Sycamores are an invasive species, with their little missionary seeds quickly sprouting up when dropped. They stay near the mother trees, but this doesn't affect their growth, meaning they can grow densely and still thrive. Sadly, many people dislike these trees, especially when they are planted in towns or cities, because of the samaras and leaves that litter the ground. They tend to be resistant to air pollution, though, really making them an excellent choice. I, personally, like to crunch their leaves, even if it makes a mess. Call it the inner child, but, crunching leaves is the most satisfying thing you can do, especially in autumn. Now, for one of the first little stories about the sycamore, it's come from quite an odd location. The ancient Egyptian goddess, Hathor, also known as the Holy Cow. No, I wasn't swearing, that is actually who she is. Went and sat in a sycamore tree and created the earth and sun from its boughs. You don't really tend to see holy cows and sycamores these days, just a few birds and the odd squirrel, but there is still a nice little creation myth to tell your friends if you're struggling for conversation topics. These trees were introduced from southern Europe in the 15th century for pleasure gardens and decorative purposes, with their fine, creamy grain and broad green leaves. Whilst the sycamore is very enduring and resistant to harsh weather, and, as mentioned before, pollution, they are also very prone to disease. You might have seen the nasty black spots growing on their leaves in the summer, causing them to fall prematurely to the ground. This is called anthracnose, and are at great risk of grey squirrels stripping off all the bark, the little cheeky critters. Sycamores are part of the maple family, Sapindaceae, which also include standard field maples, Japanese acers, and Norwegian maples. Did you know that there is an ancient Welsh tradition of making decorative love spoons? These spoons have twisting, intricately carved shafts, and they are made of sycamore wood, due to their clarification and divination properties, or the fact that they were abundant. Either way, these unique handcrafted spoons are still given to people as a clear romantic gesture, and are even exchanged today. Unlike most trees in the British Isles, the sycamore doesn't really have a lot of folklore behind it, having only been relatively introduced into the country. There are, however, a few beliefs around it. The sycamore will keep away fairies and stops them from spoiling the milk. In Cornwall, the 1st of May is known as Flora Day. Children and young people would wander into the countryside on that day, calling in at various farmhouses along their path. They would be refreshed with milk, cream and junket, which is a dairy-based pudding, before gathering sycamore, or May, branches, and use the curls to make whistles and peeweeps, before taking the rest of the boughs back into their towns, tooting their little instruments all the way. Sadly, this custom has long since died out, but people still refer to the sycamore as a whistle tree. In Ayrshire, there is a town known as Durshill. There was a tree known as Durshill, or a tree of remembrance, as people would mourn the loss of a man under its branches. By the school founded by St. Fintan, there is a sycamore used as a rag tree. If you've never heard of the rag tree concept before, the idea is that you take a small strip of old cloth, make a wish on it, then tie it to a rag tree for it to come true. There's one up in Severn Valley Country Park, or there used to be, up by the spring. This was common back in the 1940s, but these days people tend to leave pennies in the tree trunks instead. Burial in sycamore coffins apparently returns the spirit of the womb to the mother tree and gives providence in the afterlife. And I'm afraid that's all I've got on the folklore aspect of things, I'm afraid. Although I have one superb gardening tip for all you green-thumbed listeners. Never, ever prune a sycamore in the springtime, as all the sap rises up through it in the winter, and the tree might bleed to death. The horror! Apparently, a sycamore will smell like strawberry jam when the wood is damp but hot, usually after a July thunderstorm. I've often been walking in the forest when I get a whiff of this scent, and it definitely gives me a lovely sense of the lazy days in midsummer. Sycamores can live for up to 400 years and grow up to 19 metres after half a century. There are rumours that this tree was introduced by the Romans, meaning they've been here a whole lot longer than we thought, but the chances are it was still properly introduced in the 15th century, as I said before. Now, for a few extra fun facts, just because I really, really love little scraps of ever so slightly random knowledge, if you can't already tell. The word sycamore comes from the Greek word sykomoras, which means fig mulberry, a native Mediterranean fig tree. American sycamores are known as ghost trees because of the hauntingly pale, bare crowns of these. One tree can produce up to 10,000 seeds per year. One of the main purposes for sycamore timber is for furniture, or, more particularly, worktops, joinery, alongside smaller kitchen utensils, as it is durable and does not taint the food with any special flavours. However, it does need to be thoroughly treated against rot, because, in that sense, it is a bit sketchy. These noble hardwoods, however, have enough redeeming qualities to be one of the most high-end furniture components. This tree has become an emblem of protection and hope in America, as in the 1777 Battle of Brandywine, a noble specimen of over a century in age sheltered the troops of General Washington from the onslaught. Since then, it has been revered throughout the country. Also, what I'm about to tell you should not be tried at home. Go to a trained medical consultant or a professional before experimenting with any of this. Medically, the juice from the sycamore bark is applied to tumours to soften and dissipate them. It is also used to seal the edges of wounds and is a general vulnerary. As always, this episode draws to a close, and so it is time for our horoscope. If you were born on a Friday, then the sycamore is your tree. In close coalition with the planet Venus, you will be in touch with your more romantic side and likely to gain extensive wealth, material and immaterial. Your luck, however, will vary from day to day, so be prepared for a rocky road to success. As a person, you are very resilient and have a regenerative catalyst in other people, a breath of fresh air, if you will, compared to everyone else. You will be a victor in almost any battle you choose, but choose well. Do not let your potential fortune go to your head, or the fight will not be won by anybody. Goodbye and thank you for listening. If you like this, please consider subscribing to my channel for similar content, and I will see you again in 2 weeks.